Hi. This week, the cards that were pulled were adventure and compassion, and they truly reflected the sessions that were had this week. So talking about adventure, I'm off for a couple of weeks. So on the next two shares, I have picked cards that I will read out that hopefully you can reflect or see how that represents or gives an insight to your journey as life goes on. This week, I'm calling it I Am That. I Am That. And the sense of I am that is not related to identity or personality. It's a deep sense of calm that you can rest and sit with. I am that. Not much disturbs it, but when you're not in touch with it, we tend to get pulled to different places. In that space of I am that, the stillness, the ground source of all that is, you're more able to read or stand in what is going on. It's not always that easy to get to because there are annoyances, there are upsets. And what showed up this week is a sense of those who are not like us or like me. And there's a sense of who you are feels that's the way to be. What's the matter with these other people? And what showed up was rather, it was like, it showed so clearly how we can see it and meet it in a very different way. And I can't remember now what bush essence that came up. I use bush essence, Australian bush essences a lot for insights, whether it is one word in relationship to something. And sometimes the negative conditions are actually the positives that are required. But the information that comes to me via them is immense. And I can't remember what this particular essence was. I think it was Grevillea. Red Grevillea. And what the word that really stood out was like, this flower is grown in a particular region. And it was so clear that this being who I was working with was of a particular region. And the being that disturbed her I am that, which had settled in more and more over the years, got shaken up, and this other being just happened to be tired, grumpy, not interested, when they're generally not interested anyway, but it kind of really got and shook her up. And when the word region came up, it was quite wonderful because it was like, well, you live in this region and they live in that region, completely different cultures, completely different sets of what's okay and what's not okay. And if we can see those that are not of our ilk or have a totally different way of processing life to a point that it's always upsetting you because they're always running late or they're always behind time, they're always catching up, and there's never an issue of being able to relax, or can be an aspect of they always get really upset and blow up over something that the state is doing or the government is doing or the body corp is doing or whatever it is, it just is this fuse or this pressure cooker that just has to come out. And in that case, it's probably healthy. And what was really wonderful, this sense of they're in this region and they're not about to change. They're not going to change overnight. They're probably not going to change in this lifetime. They live in a different region to the one you're in. And yours feels familiar to you, and it feels comfortable, and it feels considerate, and it feels kind and loving. And this region is perceived as like it just shouldn't be like that. And there was a sense of being able to go cold, unmoving, and to just let it be what it is and not disturb you. And it became quite useful and calming to a sense of I am that, and being okay with others who, in their way of being, may not necessarily have been as calm as I am that, but this is my process. And these things can be happening with relatives. It can be with neighbours. It can be with partners that you live with. It's so wonderful that you can go to your own I am that and recognise that they're in a different region. Last week we spoke about different rooms in a house. This is totally different aspects, and it can be literally in your house as well, but it can also be others in your community. So I found that rather interesting. And then another version of I am that was a session with someone who, and it's interesting because the three I'm going to mention now weren't feeling quite centered in themselves. We can lose ourselves in the world and not be centered. And sometimes that centering is not there because we can't see it, or we can't join the dots, or we've let go of an aspect that is so true to ourselves. That I am that, the comfort and the silence of that is not felt because we're now behaving or not getting to what that is. And one was rather lovely, and I think you may possibly, as I do, we can relate to this. We have so many voices, our own and including others over the years, that says, well, who do you think you are? And those voices are such, and it's pretty hard to read yourself. But what showed up in this was you are not giving yourself near enough credit. And the more we feel something is natural to us, or we are in fact so skilled that it feels like nothing. You know, these people where you can drop in and they go, oh, I'll put the kettle on, I'll make some scones, and they're sitting there and they make some scones, they have it in the oven, and before you know it, they call it nothing. To me, that's an extraordinary skill. So, but the skill here, that of the depth of being, was not recognized. And when it was sat with, they could feel the years of attending to the skill, the years of being present, the years of being there with others, and to give credit to it Or else there's always that feeling of, I'm still getting there, I'm still getting there, I'm still getting there, and not feeling the depth of your place in what you have, and the silence and the profoundness of it in getting it, then comes through in interaction with others. And that sense of feeling how you see things find its place. Very often we don't give ourselves enough credit. And with one, the turmoil was still very much there. That sense of giving oneself credit was lost in the annoyance, to the extent that the passion that was felt for the next project couldn't show itself. Because this annoyance of those that are of a different region was blocking that sense of the skills which are fabulous, that can be used going through the threshold that is presenting itself at the moment for many. And another was a sense of losing I am that. Remembering that as a child, the playfulness and the fun and the joy of entering into life had almost been put away in a box. Thank God it wasn't locked up with a key and the key thrown away, but it was in a box. And there was a sense of coming out of the box and entering into play, to the extent of having a play fly fight on the carpet, and the joy of rumbling and really entering into life with a sense of fun. Because seriousness can take you over to such an extent that you forget what life is actually even about. It gets so serious, you end up stuck in a situation, and the only thing you can feel is all of that, and then you die. So getting in touch with I am that. In this case, it was quite interesting. It was like nothing needs to change here. You are that. You are that river that is flowing. How did you end up stepping off on the bank of the river and watching the river flow by? How did that happen? To jump back in to that flow that you are, that is still living within but needs to come through. And in the play and in the joy and in livening that up and opening the box and bringing it through, then it will be easier to see what steps next to take going forward, because life has shown up, rather than this is it and then you die. The other one that showed up in terms of I am that was quite profound. That sense of being self, when the depth of this being was a profound nothingness, a silence, a depth. See, nothingness is never empty. That sense of profound silence from which all things come, and to have that as the base. And in this case, it got disturbed right at birth. And it was like this being was still hanging outside of themselves and had not yet come in. And the disturbance in her life was enormous. So to not be in touch with that sense of connecting in the presence to I am that and living from that premise is missing the mark. And apparently that's what a sin is. A sin is when you miss the mark. But to not miss the mark means to be present. And this energy, because of that element, that immense disturbance at birth, created a shock and a fearfulness. And when that happens, it doesn't feel like an adventure. It feels like, when the heck's this going to all be over? You know, to tune into yourself and recognize whether you are present, actually present, and to identify what might be taking you away from that moment, and take the time to rest into it, to find that place that settles. Because when you find that, that's when the self comes through in action and life is seen as an adventure. And when it comes to, I'm in this region and in there, that's their region. And gosh, how many regions of the world are there at the moment that people are playing that with? And a sense of compassion for yourself to begin with. An extension of that to realize they're probably not in very different circumstances than yourself, feeling this region on the other side that's very different. So, adventure. Enter into everything with openness and love, and enjoy the adventure of living. You never know what's coming next. Wouldn't be an adventure, would it, if that wasn't the case? Compassion. Allow tenderness and kindness into your thoughts and actions, and soften your attitude to yourself and others. Feel how good it is to be kind to yourself. Lovingly allow the journey of others. You can be there for them with understanding and support. Let go of sympathy and allow compassion. Allow the feminine energy of gentleness to enter your daily life. So I'll meet you next week with the cards that relate to that. Much love.